Israel successfully defended against an Iranian ballistic missile attack Tuesday. Iran's launch of ballistic missiles is threatening to spread warfare throughout the region. Now, Israeli forces and Iran-backed Hezbollah fighters, they have engaged in fighting on the ground in southern Lebanon after that launch. Now, that counter left at least 8 soldiers dead. Natalie Brandt has more details from the White House.
A day after Iran's massive missile attack on Israel, President Biden says he talked to world leaders to coordinate a response which will include new sanctions. It comes as Israel has vowed painful retaliation against Iran.
We'll be discussing with the Israelis what they're going to do, but all 7 of us agree that they have a right to respond, but they should respond in proportion.
While Tuesday's attack led to minimal damage in Israel, the Biden administration says it was intended to cause significant destruction. New video shows U.S. naval destroyers helping shoot down incoming missiles.
Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin says the U.S. remains in position to protect its personnel in the region and allies in the face of threats from Iran and Iranian-backed terrorist groups.
Sadly, I think this is going to get worse before it gets any better.
Brian Katulis of the Middle East Institute believes Israel could respond with a strike, as it did following Iran's April attack.
It'll be what I've called a Goldilocks kind of strike, trying to not hit too hard or too soft, not too hard that it prompts a bigger regional escalation than we already have, and not too soft that it doesn't send a message.
People in the region fear a widening war. The Israeli military says it's marking the Jewish holiday Rosh Hashanah, fighting on multiple fronts from Lebanon to Gaza. Natalie Brandt, CBS News, the White House.
Now, while Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that Iran will pay as fears grow of a wider all-out war between the two regional military powerhouses, Iran's military chief warned of broader strikes if Israel responds.